And now, the news. Last Thursday, I believe it was, a man, not too far from here, thought to himself, is it possible to constantly look at something and still never recognize it? To study a thing forever and yet never know its true nature? And there's this other man up the road a ways who asked himself, could it be possible that the very attempt to know yourself is at the core of the frustration of the few who seek to know themselves? I guess we can only hope that men with such questions continue to keep a safe distance. Everyone lives by a stream. A few think about controlling it. They're known as being asleep. One man studied rats in a maze for years before realizing that there were no rodents present and that he had imagined the maze. However, in a school not listed in common catalogs, such a man can graduate with honors. And now, finally revealed here, where thought comes from. Until you think, there is nothing to think about. And now tonight's transparently spurious mystical legend. A liberated man once said, trying to achieve liberation will always cause cramps. It has been said that the cause of all ignorance is thought. But more comprehensively put would be that thought initially came about to bring on intelligence. Then only later, in the view of a few, did it produce the opposite. Should a doctor, hip to what's happening, that is to say, aware of the case, continue to treat an imaginary patient, or do the professional and proper thing and let him die of neglect and be done with it? A man asked a mystic what he had done wrong in his years of attempting to stop the mechanical flow of thought. And the mystic pointed to something and said, that's not thought. To believe that you must know yourself, and that to know yourself you must observe yourself, is to be forever engaged in an effort without end. If a less flattering description of that result comes to mind, be my guest in using it. Everyone is born by a brook. A few always want to redirect its course. They are what are called being in the dark. Imaginary parts, no matter the combinations tried, nor the effort expended, can ever be put together to form a real whole. Either this or that must be me, sing the phantom voices. I'm a man without a country. I'm a man without a God. I'm a man without a cause. I'm a man without a man. One man's travel tale. At an early age, I left home, feeling I should go on a journey. I knew not where and inquired of others, but received no reply that satisfied. I then began to read what others with a similar urge had said about their experiences until I found one that rang pertinent to me, and attempted to retrace the journey recounted, but without ever reaching the destination described. I began to consider the possibility that each man with this particular itch must discover, or perhaps develop, his own individual passage and commence personally to operate accordingly. Using this approach, I began to recognize the destination to be the same for all men on this odyssey, regardless of the route pursued or the method of travel employed. Then came the ultimate realization that this peculiar journey was all in my mind, and likewise for all who'd gone this way before. Once this became clear, I returned home. Believing that things thought about provide their own reason for being thought about is just another description of your consciousness being totally in the dark. Now, another episode of Maybe and Perhaps. Maybe the most captious words e'er uttered are, "He who knows himself is enlightened." Perhaps the most perilous interpretation thereof is in taking observations of oneself for knowledge. Why are recollections of one's past such a poor teacher? Why do men not truly learn from their mistakes? It is because the memories one has of oneself are an imaginary reality. A man asked a mystic what he had done wrong in his years of trying to stop the mechanical flow of thought. And the mystic nodded toward something and said, "That's not what you try to stop." Everyone has a radio. It continually receives two different stations simultaneously. Most people hear it as one. One man who played the game every day would periodically win the lottery. And for the several days that the prize money lasted, he lived in what was for him extraordinary circumstances. But most of his life was spent in what was for him in routine, dull conditions. Although he did not initially realize it, the man became addicted to the unpredictably appearing lottery prize, and in spite of his experiences to the contrary, began to believe it was possible to win every day, which seemed to help make his non-winning, uneventful days more tolerable. But gradually he began to discover in his everyday life possibilities of the extraordinary, and became less and less captivated with and expectationally dependent on the capricious payoff of the lottery, which I might note was imaginary to begin with. Throughout the history of man have been a relatively secret few engaged in a relatively unknown sport known as extreme thinking, wherein you think of new ways to think about thinking. Everyone lives by two streams. They both gurgle. Most call the sound of one stream the wild stallion, and the other clear skies. Real version. Everyone lives by two streams. They both gurgle. Most call the sound of one stream the wild stallion, and don't even notice that the other one has a voice. One view of man's ordinary mental condition could be, wild stallions are loose and unrealized amidst otherwise clear skies. Until you think, there is nothing to think about. For you, since you ask, and since I know you so well, for you, I've got some good news and I've got some bad news. The bad news is that there is no way out of an imaginary labyrinth. And the good news is the same thing. For you. That is, because I like you. A realized man once, while explaining a matter, referred to the five senses, and a listener interrupted him saying, "But doesn't thought constitute a sixth sense?" And the speaker replied, "You're crazy." A boy said to his father, "I have mental vertigo." To which his elder responded, "Don't you wish you could get up that high?" A man said to a mystic, "I have heard you speak, and much of what you say I do not understand, and some of what you say I believe to be incorrect. But I find it all fascinating and would like to discuss and debate your ideas with you so that I might make more sense of them. And the mystic replied, I will decline your offer, for nothing that I say does make any sense, and you either understand that immediately upon hearing it or you don't, and no amount of subsequent talking about it will change the situation. It is impossible to comprehend the essence of a pond while standing in it up to the waist. 'Tis only once out of it that its illusionary nature is apparent. Only after you hang up the phone does the conversation become clear. Said one man, I'll tell you the greatest development ever, the off switch. You mean on your TV set? Someone responded. No, he said. Then you must mean the one on your computer. No, he again replied, I just mean the off switch. To try and treat the mind with the mind is to be forever captured by the illusion that the illness is the medicine. A man asked one he believed experienced in such matters, do people really wake up? And received the reply, it's more a matter of getting through the morass of sleep. An approach worth considering. If you can't seem to stay conscious constantly, how about every other second? Hey, it's worth thinking about, so to speak. Everyone's floating down the river. A few want to stop. They're called dazed and confused, sometimes known as those wishing to awaken. How can you really expect to change your state of mind with the mind when the mind is all that makes up your state of mind? Yes, I know, you'd think that it couldn't be clearer, but mud finds it difficult to see the water in its mix. Tonight's fairy tale. Once upon a time, there was a guy who had the ability to be two guys, but he never knew it, since whenever he was one of the guys, he had absolutely no awareness of the other one. Well, that was fairly straightforward. Question, is it actually our normal state of consciousness that causes us to trip and break things and all the other problems? Or is it our fretting about the state? But that can't be. It simply can't. Attaboy, keep telling yourself that. And from another room, a lad yelled out, oh, I've got a cramp. And his father yelled back, you've been trying to think your way out of way to awakening again. If all thoughts are illusions, then is not the grandest illusion of them all the thought of being free of thought? But that can't be. Can it? Now you're thinking. A man had a dog that wouldn't stay home. Once he solved that problem, he had no more problems. And now for tonight's bonus question. If engaged in a study of something illusionary and you become distracted, of what significance can you possibly miss? Think carefully now. This is for both the luggage and the trip. Once blind, always blind. But one-sided, well, you still got to keep working on that one. Anything worth thinking about is worth being ignored. Humans sense that they are on a journey, and never feeling as though they have reached the end of it is what keeps them non-physically going. One man notes, while nudging us in the ribs, that it is no mere accident, prompts he, the close similarity of the words feel and fell. One guy's inspirational thought for the day. No matter what you plan, no matter what you attempt, no matter how hard you try, if there is such a thing as destiny, then you can just forget it, I guess. End quote. You understand, I was quoting him. It's easy for people to confuse in their minds the actor with the part. I'm just paid to read this stuff. One man had this thing that he actually had only when he thought about it. It began to damn near drive him crazy trying to figure out where it was the rest of the time. Plus, the only reason I emphasize some of it is it's underlined. I mean, it's got stage directions here on the news for you people that think the news is some kind of straightforward, serious something or other. You only take imaginary dogs as otherwise when they stray from the yard. The experiences come and go. Your condition is forever. One father's advice to his son in a certain area was that he dedicate himself to continually reminding himself that the mind itself provides all of the thoughts it ever thinks. Close the door behind you, he would often shout to the lad. Once, a man experienced in such affairs said, "Things were just like they are before you went to sleep, and things remain just as they are while you are asleep. And things will still be exactly like they were after you awaken from sleep." What do you think of that? Yeah. And everyone who actually heard what he said dropped dead. There was once a man, in reality many men, who could make noises that would upset birds, but not noises to upset themselves. They are what is known as half alive and half dead, half here and half not, half themselves and half themselves, waiting for the two to meet. Wait on, brave warrior. Wait on, you noise makers, you. But things will be exactly like they've always been, even should you wake yourself up. Why not totally drop dead now? Now, when it could mean something. With understanding comes a cessation of coming and going. Tonight's poem, entitled, Here's the Deal. Okay, here's the deal. Nothing begins and nothing ends, and only thoughts otherwise in between. A man said to a mystic, "I am a literate man, an intellectual man, a man thoroughly fascinated by words and the life of the mind." And to himself the mystic said, and from our view, also a dead man, from the equator up. Remember, boys and girls, travel doesn't kill people. Geography does. A man with a hunting dog lived by a river, and the dog would continually point to the river. And the man continually tried to go catch the river. The dog thought the man was an idiot. The knowledge that men ordinarily have of themselves is no more than always, after the fact, impotent mental notations, and of no more usefulness in the lives they actually lead than are x-rays in the treatment of the broken bones pictured. There was once a man who undertook the study of himself. He started out studying his body, which produced no useful results. He then turned his attention to the study of the mind, which at first seemed more promising, but a promise which, after years of effort, was never fulfilled. He now wonders if he should have gotten a dog instead. One man went on a non-buying spree. That is, he refused to think any routine thought that he hadn't already thought before. "No new, useless redundancy for me, thanks," said he. Finally, one day, after years of frustrating struggle, a man looked skyward and cried out, "Please, if there be a God, help me deal with my mind." And a booming voice from nowhere responded by asking, "Did you say your mind?" And the surprised mind replied, "Yes, dear God, my mind." And the voice then said, "Idiot, you still don't get it." If a shout goes out, there are forces at work that no one can explain. The ordinary all look outward, those who know inward. Only stupid stuff is held sacred. Things men can talk about. The only justifiable excuse for an intelligent man to be thinking is if he is thinking of new ways to think about thinking. As he stood surveying all of his backyard, a man thought, "Flowers do not know themselves, and bees do not know themselves. Yet they bloom, they fly, they fully live their lives. What is it with man that causes him to believe that there is some sort of real importance to him knowing himself? And perhaps even curiouser than that, just what the hell does he believe that to actually mean?" First man says, "I guess it could really be a struggle to ever recognize just how stupid you are." To which a second man replies, "But something even harder is to stop being stupid once you realize it." And after thinking about this for a bit, the first man says, "That doesn't make any sense at all." And the second man says, "I know." Perceived only by the post-stupid is the fact that once you begin to think, and hence become stupid, it is truly difficult after that to just up and stop. I may be riding a disreputable ass, but it's my ass. It's mine, I tell you. It's mine. Yeah, that's what they all think. Yes. First would-be mystic says, "I guess it's really an unimaginable struggle to ever fully realize just how asleep you are." To which one more experienced in the matter replies, "But something even more fantastic is how hard it is to stop sleeping even after you become plainly aware of the condition." And the novice, after pondering this for a moment, says, "But that makes no sense whatsoever." Yeah. And the mystic just nods his agreement. I just thought perhaps some of you might enjoy this slightly verbally different version of that last story. Some would-beers prefer such terms as being asleep to simply being stupid. I mean, I can understand why, and I can respect. No, strike respect. I went too far. And I'm lying now. We'll just leave it at, I can understand that. Not that I like it, nor should you. A man who takes no prisoners has no prisoners. For a while, one man held the private position that there is nothing worth thinking about, which he later revised to, if there is anything worth thinking about, I'm not thinking about it. A man called a mystic on the phone and said, I have always wanted to talk to you. And after the mystic said nothing in return, the man said, did you hear me? And the mystic bluntly replied, yes, I was waiting for you to say whatever it was that you called me to say. And the man, momentarily flustered, finally blurted out, well, I guess I mainly called just to tell you that you're my hero. And that being that, the mystic hung up. The reason that mystics so seldom avail themselves of phones and other communications equipment and technology is they generally know how to contact themselves directly. One man exclaimed, I get so excited over the possibilities. And please note, being sufficiently excited over the possibilities creates new possibilities. Headline, Progress, all aboard, now leaving on track 9. After a lifelong struggle to awaken, one man says he can now go extended lengths of time and never think about it. All aboard, now tracking on leave 9. Headline, Get to the Point. A man asked a mystic what his primary teaching was, and he replied, be as direct as possible. And the man retorted, but you could have just said, be direct, and made the same point, but more directly. And the mystic came back, and I could have jabbed my finger in your eye and answered you even more directly than that. And the man muttered, very funny, under his bad breath as he walked away. Okay, pull up your socks, tighten your belt, suck in that stomach, and splash some cold water in your face. It's time to face up to it. No matter what it's about, talk's just talk. When I take the page and put it, that means that was all there was. Headline, one of several possible final words regarding the matter of idiocy. Any human who takes, that is, who thinks life serious, is a certifiable idiot and worse. And lastly, and not in a manner unrelated, one man involved in activities such as this says that he has about decided that one of the things he can do most conducive to achieving his desired aim of awakening is to not treat the matter with more solemnity than it deserves. To, in other words, handle it pretty much as a natural part of ordinary everyday life, as if it were in any way possible for it to be otherwise. Well, what the hell will I talk about? Don't we talk about the ones I dropped on the floor that had mistakes in grammar or spelling? Wouldn't that be fun? Then we could diagram what you've been thinking all day. I believe I'll think of something to talk about myself. Well, since we don't have time to hold a secret ballad, no, I'm not going to sing. It's a T, not a ballad. Ballad. How about this one that I know I particularly had no interest in, so I thought I'd pick it out. A man asked a mystic what he had done wrong in all of his years of attempting to stop the mechanical flow of thought, and the mystic pointed to something and said, that's not thought. There was, a few pages after that, another news item that the first two lines of it were the exact same thing. The man asked what he'd done wrong, and the mystic this time nodded toward something and said, that is not what you're trying or should be trying to stop. If you can see, or in your mind, if you can put the two together, that someone has been involved with activities similar to this throughout the ages of man, that can normally be referred to in shorthand, at least the effort, the attempt to change oneself on the basis the key to my success? What the hell? That the method, the attempt, the mode of transportation, of change, these is most succinct description of it is the attempt to bring under control. It's perhaps a little more readily, verbally palatable than to stop thought, but to bring under some control for a person to be able to take their thoughts, which constitute the only inner life that has any validity to speak of, is to stop or to control, to bring to bear some personal control over this continual flow. Whereas in an ordinary man's life, the only exception that people experience, if you'll note, is if you have some specific intellectual, some job at hand that in fact requires some thought, something that the body would not do at peak efficiency if it simply blundered through it in a physical trial and error fashion. What few times, other than those people who have jobs nowadays, or any days, a job that requires a continual degree of focused intellectual activity to figure out problems. As I said, that you would never be able to balance books. You wouldn't live long enough to make a living as an accountant if you had to learn to do it through trial and error, or to be a brain surgeon, or to be an attorney, to be a programmer, to do almost any job other than perhaps be a farmer. And even then you would be at a disadvantage if you didn't have enough sense to recognize that the conditions in which we live physically seem to change from time to time, and for you to remember that and act accordingly. But other than the times that people are required or to operate at maximum efficiency, that they must apply their mind to some immediate problem to, in the most efficient manner, get through it or to solve it. Other than that, all it takes is a bit of observation and you realize that what goes on in your head is out of control. It apparently has no rhyme or reason, and it never stops, and it serves no useful purpose. Almost everyone on the planet lives with this. They always have, and it's no great inconvenience, obviously, or they would be inconvenienced. They would say so. I don't know about you, but have you ever known an ordinary person that would hesitate to bitch and complain? So obviously the vast majority of people find no fault with this situation. A few, on the other hand, have, and they're the ones that live by a stream, and they're always thinking about trying to divert it, control it, or do something with it, according to the news items. The man complains to someone that he thought was experienced in the matter. Well, a combination of rhetorical complaint and a question, or a rhetorical question, or a real question, or something. He asked the one that he thought had some experience and knowledge in it, what had he done wrong? The tacit assumption of the little news item being that he's not satisfied. As far as he's concerned, he has not succeeded in being able to control thought, much less stop it, but to even affect any effect on it. The one who supposedly knew, that was questioned, gave a response, two responses, which, let me put them together, is that he nodded and he pointed, and when I keep saying something, the way in which the news item was written and what I was attempting to convey was that neither I nor anyone else should be pointing to what it is. So when I say that in response the mystic pointed to something, see, you got to fill in that part, or that he nodded towards something. And his nodding and his pointing was joined by his verbal response. Two of them I'll put together was, that's not thought to begin with, and to end with, that's not what you should be trying to stop anyway. Would it make the news any more interesting if I said that the man who gave that answer, what if we made the story this way? The news item. I'll start all over. A guy goes to study with someone apparently teaching ways to stop thought and to change one's permanently, to change one's state of mind, one's level, state of consciousness. And their method was to bring thought under some control and ultimately to be able to stop it. And so the man went and he studies with this guy. He joins up with his little school organization, a monastery, and he studies with him for years and years and years and years and years. And listens to the guy talk continually about the needs, the ways to go about it, the payoffs of being able to control and ultimately stop, perhaps, thought. And after many, many years, this man requests a private audience with the guy teaching this system. And then he goes to him. And he says, you know, I've been here a long time. And he says, yeah, I think I recognize you. And he says, I have worked diligently, following the method. And I must tell you, I won't know what's wrong. I have never complained. I have done to the best of my ability. And I believe I've understood, since you talk in a straightforward manner, all of your explanations and directions. I've tried them. And I get a taste of what it would be like. I immediately sense the potential profit of being able to do this. But my question is, I have done this now for many years, and I have not succeeded. I mean, what's my problem? How in the world have I gone about this incorrectly? What have I done wrong? Does that help? And then the guy that's been teaching it, then he gives some kind of nod towards something and says, that's not thought. Plus, that is not what you should be trying to stop anyway. Now that I've fattened up the story, now I personally wonder what the guy's retort, how he responded to that. Maybe, well, since this newscast is only rated for children or people under 14, that we don't know what his response was. Can you conceive that's possible? And not just playing with words, although it does come into some accounting, that a person could spend their life attempting to do something. I say their life, spend a long period of time attempting to do something that without any doubt, based upon the momentary either experiences they have had in attempting to accomplish it, or, as I put in the last version of the story, your undeniable, your unquestioned feeling, sensation when you hear about this thing to try and do, that you immediately hear it and think and feel, yes, that's it, and undertake it. And there is never any hint that you're doing anything incorrectly. The only downside is that you cannot seem to achieve anything resembling a permanent success at it. Is it possible, after all of that time, given the conditions I just described, that to still discover, you have to put this in serious quotation marks, that you have been mistaken? I withdraw mistaken. There is no word. All right, mistaken. What the hell? Just remember, I don't mean it. That you have been mistaken. You could say that you have been less than 20/20 sighted. Mm-hmm. There's no doubt something going on inside of men beyond their heartbeat, their respiration. The thing going on continually is that which makes them, from their view, men, which makes them distinct from all other creatures. And for a few people, even though that is what distinguishes them, if you recall one of the news items tonight, it was said, or it was noted that there have been claims in the past that the cause of all stupidity, of all ignorance, is what it said. The cause of all ignorance is thought, which would make some sort of discounted fortune cookie in a would-be mystical school. It has just enough, makes just enough sense that nonsensical would-be mystics could read it and go, and pass it around. Of course, don't be at an adjoining table and say, would you care to explain that exactly? Would you care to interpret that? But it's just, whoa, get out of here. But that was not the end of the news item. The claims have been that the cause of all ignorance is thought. And the rest of the item said that more comprehensively put, which brought about a laugh for some reason, originally. Just shows you can't tell the same joke twice. More comprehensively put, you laughed the first time. More comprehensively put, well, I just wonder because somebody with a serious sense of humor to find comprehensively put humorous. More comprehensively put, the news item suggested would be to say that the initial purpose of thought was to bring about intelligence. And it was only later, from the view of a few, that it began to result in its opposite. Even though that sentence, I guess rhetorically makes sense, can you make any sense? That something could start out doing one thing, that thought was for the purpose of bringing about what we call intelligence. Because there's no such thing as intelligence. We would not be staying here talking. There's no consciousness, but there's no intelligence in the human sense. We're not talking about instinctive, animal, physical intelligence, but there is no intelligence without thought. And so you could look at it properly, not incorrectly, and say that thought initially was for the purpose of producing or to bringing about intelligence. So let's accept that as it's undeniable. You could come up with another description, but that, thus far, you can't really deny it. But then how about the rest of it that was only later in the view of a few? That the few began to see that it was now producing just the opposite. How could something beneficial, and as far as information given, it doesn't say that the thing involved, in this case thought, has changed. It's not as though that at one time there was a foodstuff and that you ate it and it was nourishing, and then slowly throughout the years it became toxic. There is no indication in the news item itself that the substance, that the thing, in this case thought, has changed. That its initial purpose was to bring about intelligence. And by all majority views, by the common view, that is still going on. And that's the whole point of education, science, investigation. It's the whole point of thinking still. That if that be true with the first man, thousands or millions of years ago, that the purpose of thought was to bring on intelligence, then from the ordinary view of thought, it is still continuing. It is still the case. But from a minority view, people who are interested in such as this, whether they would have ever expressed it this way or not, it has now, to them, it is now producing in them individually. It is now producing the opposite. Even though the sentence, I suggest, rhetorically makes sense, from your experience of life, does it in fact make sense? Could it be possible? Since I tried to draw a parallel between a foodstuff that at one time was nourishing and then became fatal, if you caught that, then right quick, if I jump back, the could continue the parallel where I've taken thought now, would be to say that there was a foodstuff that one time you found nourishing, and the foodstuff has not changed, but for some reason, your system has now changed in such a way that the foodstuff, which has not changed, your system now finds to be toxic. You know, that could be true. There is something, as a matter of fact, there are things similar in the ordinary world physically. But I must point this out. For a person who becomes allergic to a certain foodstuff, that at an earlier age they weren't, and throughout the years, for whatever reason, their body now can no longer tolerate a certain type of food, a certain particular foodstuff. Such people are considered, in a straightforward medical, scientific, physical manner, that their system has become anomalous. That is, if it was a decent foodstuff to start with, and their body tolerated it, that we're assuming that the majority of all the people, all other humans found it nourishing, and the foodstuff did not change. But in some time later, their system could no longer digest it, could not tolerate it, rejected it. It made them sick. There is a point to this. Understand, they are not considered now normal. They would be treated. A doctor, someone would attempt to cure them. The point is, they would now be considered to be anomalous. Their system is sick, out of step, out of whack. Does anybody find any parallel between those trying to, as a system, as the saying goes, those seeking to awaken, to achieve enlightenment, that they have gone from the beginning, like everyone else, that thought brought about intelligence. You didn't have a choice. You didn't decide to. You didn't plan to. That's how you became intelligent. That's how you became a full-functioning human, that you could speak, you had abstract, non-physical memory. You became, quote, intelligent by thought. But then those who are attracted and interested in activities such as this, sometime later, find that thought, the very thing that made them intelligent, that thought now is producing the opposite result. And if we were to say that thought has not changed, then you're back to my parallel, try it again, that your system has changed. That which you're ingesting, the parallel to being with food, that the thoughts, the process of thinking, the individual thoughts are of no consequence. They don't even bear on it, period. But the process of thinking, the activity of thinking, now, even though it has remained stable, that with a few people, their system, in some way, undergoes a change wherein that which at one time was acceptable, if not nourishing, is now otherwise. And if this was a physical, strictly a physical phenomenon, and anyone else knew about it, we would, if we were just talking about in general, we would judge them to be ill. Is the desire to be enlightened an illness? Well, if you swam along in my wake with all of that, you at least got to consider the possibility. And I don't mean it, God forbid, seriously. But the point being, if you can get past that, that it is open to severe question as to whether thought is actually the problem. That if it has not changed, and it is what is responsible, that brought about intelligence, that had it not been for thought, you would not be listening to this. Those of you that take activities such as this in a very personal and sincere manner, had it not been for thought, you would not have the ability to be interested in this. And then to look at it as now being an assault on thought, in a sense. To struggle against the mechanical, just the continual flow of thought that at one time you found nourishing, and that at the same time the majority of humans still find nourishing. They find no fault. The ordinary, average, sane person finds no fault with thought, with their thinking. If any time they do, they find it to be an extremely, personally, an anomalous situation. is when people say, and it's always with ordinary sane people, it's always an extreme circumstance, the death of a loved one, with some great trauma, physical or otherwise in life, the loss of a business, their leg, their new car, a loved one, that they get the kind of idée fixe, and their thinking just dwells on something that they find distasteful, something that is irritating to them, but they see it as being a distinctly ephemeral, an anomaly. It is an illness of some sort. And if they continue to pass for being, the classification as being ordinary at all, they will in fact seek help. I have this one particular thought, and it's driving me crazy. But they see it as being an extreme exception. They do not find thought itself to be in any way annoying. It is certainly not something that you think, well, wait a minute. You're saying there's a problem that I should be struggling against thinking. If someone's laughing in the back, probably off mic, that's about the way people would feel. They'd think, well, are you an idiot? They would think perhaps that they could say to me, you mean you've got nothing better in life to worry about? That you're down to that? That's not even clutching at straws in the wind. That's clutching at the wind. To worry about, to most people, if they actually heard it and thought you were straightforwardly, literally serious, their view would be sort of like, well, you might as well be annoyed by breathing. What are you going to do? Stop? Ha, 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 ha. Come to think about it, that's not so funny, is it? Well, damn, I've gone and done it again to depress myself. You're going to have to cut the tape. I can't go on.